Hey guys, welcome to 10-Minute English with May. And today we are looking at another SAT expository reading. The title is What a Plant Knows, a Field Guide to the Senses. So this type of topic is actually quite common to test the capacities of plants and animals and coming up with new discovery. So the Venus flytrap needs to know when an ideal meal is crawling across its leaves. Closing traps require a huge expense of energy, and reopening trap takes several hours. So they only want to spring close when it's sure that the dawdling insect visiting its surface is large enough to be worth its time. And the large black hairs on lobes allow the fly traps to literally feel their prey and act as triggers that spring the trap closed when the proper prey makes its way across the trap. If the insect touches just one hair, the trap will not spring shut, but strong transition. A large enough bug will likely touch two hairs within about 20 seconds, and that signal springs the Venus flytrap into action. So far in the first paragraph, you can see this is just background information of how the contraption of Venus flytrap works. And I think a lot of it is common sense, right? It requires a trigger, and it requires enough trigger from a large enough trap so that it can save energy. We can look at the system as analogous to. So what does that mean? Analogy meaning comparison. So why provide this analogy? Usually when scientists provide analogy comparing things, the purpose is to make things easier to understand for you, right? So you might not understand how Venus flytrap works, but most people understand what short-term memory is. So how is it like short-term memory? First, the flytrap encodes the information that something has touched one of its hairs. Then it stores this information for a number of seconds, retains memory, finally retrieves this information, which is the recall. Only a second hair is touched, so that is the key. The recall of the information makes it shut. If a small ant takes a while to get from one hair to the next, the trap will have forgotten, right? So you can think of, Venus flytrap as goldfish brain, right? So they forget very quickly. So you need to have the second trigger, the recall quickly to happen. Okay, so analogy. So the trap will have forgotten its first touch by the time the ant brushes up against the next hair. In other words, so if you didn't understand what comes before, whatever comes after is a summary. It helps you paraphrase. It loses the storage of information, doesn't close, and the ant happily meanders on. How does the plant encode and store information from the unassuming bug's encounter with the first hair? How does it remember? So do you see in expository text, this is not a rhetorical question. Rather, these two questions should let us know, okay, I am actually going to come across context soon because this is the puzzle, this is the aim, this is the objective, this is the goal of the study. So they are going to try and solve these puzzles. Okay, so we're going to find out how they encode and store information and how it remembers the first touch in order to react upon the second one. So scientists have been puzzled by these questions ever since John Burden Sanderson's early report on the physiology of Venus flytrap in 1882. Okay, so the first time. A century later, these two people proposed that, so we see the recent proposal. The flytrap store information regarding how many hairs have been touched in the electric charge of its leaf. So do you see how this is their hypothesis, trying to answer that? So I'm going to write hypothesis. or speculation. So what you need to do is actually see whether the findings supports this hypothesis. And now we're going to see the step-by-step research context, which is also called the methodology or the how. So it's very simple. What did they do? They discovered that touching a trigger here causes an electric action potential in the electrical polarity of a cell membrane that induces calcium channels to open, all right, in the trap. Okay, so electric action potential induces calcium channels to open, coupling of action potentials and the opening of calcium channel is similar to the processes that occur during communication. So do you see this is analogy again? This is kind of like scientists trying to make things easier for you, right? Like comparing it to short-term memory. Okay, so explaining things in a clearer way through comparison. So similar to processes that occur during communication between people, thus causing a rapid increase in concentration of calcium ions. Okay, so it seems like concentration of calcium ions is the key to closing the trap. They propose that, all right, again, propose that, verb plus that, usually important. The trap requires a relatively high concentration to close, and that a single action from just one hair does not reach this level. All right, so that is the explanation. Therefore, a second hair needs to be stimulated to push the calcium concentration over this threshold and spring the trap. The encoding of the information requires maintaining a high enough level of calcium so that a second increase pushes the total concentration over the threshold. So you see this is kind of repetition already. Repeat. As the calcium ion concentrations dissipate is gradually disappear over time. If the second touch and potential don't happen quickly, so time is of the essence, not just a second touch to push the concentration. It needs to happen fast because remember, they have short-term memory. The final concentration after second trigger won't be high enough. And then we should draw a line because there is a shift. So after the first research we have established is the concentration ion, the second one pushes the concentration up to a threshold and it needs to happen fast. What about the subsequent research, our context 2? Does it support one's finding? That's our question. Subsequent research supports, hey, it does supports this model. Alexander colleagues first demonstrated, so again, do you see the procedural action, right? Step by step. It is indeed electricity, so they acknowledge electricity that causes the Venus flytrap to close, because remember in the first one, they also say electricity and then the concentration ion, right? To test this model, okay, so that is the beginning of their research. They rigged up very fine electrodes and applied an electrical current. This made the trap close without any direct touch to its trigger hairs. And now, do you see the word why? I know it's parentheses, but there's a contrast word, so I cannot skip it. They didn't measure the calcium levels, which is the crucial factor in the first experiment. So you have to say there is limit or at least flaw to the second experiment, even though the finding supports the first model. They didn't even test it, so how can they be sure it's completely right, right? When they modified this experiment by altering the amount of electrical current, they determined the exact electrical charge needed for the trap to close. As long as 14 microcoulombs, if that's how you pronounce that word, flow between the two electrodes, the trap closed. This could come as one large burst or as a series of smaller charges, so on and so forth. So as you can see here, they only mention the one factor, which is the electric charges, right? Electric charge in the first experiment, but it mentions nothing about the the calcium channels and the concentration of ions. Is it ions? Let me double check. Yes, the calcium ions, right? So we have to acknowledge that the second experiment, it cannot be completely reliable or valid because it didn't even test a crucial part of the first experiment. So even though it does support the model, there is limitation to what its finding is. Okay, so as you can see here, the general organization is first we address background information of Venus flytrap, and then we use analogy to explain how it works. Then we go to the speculation, the hypothesis, which is the question, and then the research plus finding. And there are two groups of researchers doing that. And you have to find a relationship of whether they support one another. Okay, and that's it for today. I will see you next time. Bye-bye.